Welcome to the LB's The Lover of Books author chat. Now to introduce this author, Lola Jaye. She is an author, a speaker, and a psychotherapist. She has penned 6 novels and a self-help book. She was born and raised in London, England, and has lived in Nigeria and the United States. I just found out that's Atlanta, maybe more places I don't know. She currently works as a psychotherapist. She's written for CNN, HuffPost, Essence, and the BBC, and also speaks on issues of mental health and racism. She has also appeared on national television, most recently discussing COVID-19 and mental well-being. Lola once gave a presentation on imposter syndrome, a subject close to her heart, because at times she's unable to believe she's an actual writer, but we know she's an actual writer, and we're so glad that she's joined us today. The Attic Child is her first epic historical novel. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
I'm going to give you a chance really quick. Can you give us like your short blip on how you describe the Attic Child?
Oh, okay. Yeah. The elevator pitch would be 2 children locked in an attic, a century apart, and they share a secret.
I love it. And so this being your first historical novel, when I was reading at the end, your author's note, it seemed like this sort of began in 2016 at the National Portrait Gallery. Is that correct?
It is. Just to kind of correct you, it's not my first historical, it's my first epic historical novel. Okay. I've done 2 others, which you might want to ask me about later. Different publishers, but yeah.
Well, so tell me about the beginning of this. Tell me about 2016. What happened at that National Portrait Gallery that got this one up off the ground?
It was a very strange thing. I'd just been back from Atlanta after living there for 3 years. I was a bit disorientated being back home. And my friend said, come along to this exhibition. And it was an interesting exhibition because it was about Black people in England in Victorian times. Now, unlike America, where there is a noted history of Black people in that time, because of the introduction of slavery in the Black experience, here, we don't really have that much or no information on that. It's usually Black people arrived in England in the 1950s. That's the narrative. So when I saw that they had an exhibition and, I knew I had to go. So I went along and it was these beautiful photographs that had been found. The backstories had been found after being in a vault for 100 years. Someone had found them and, wanted to show them to the world. And we were so privileged to be able to see that. And it was traveling all over the world. And so I saw these photos. There was a choir from South Africa that came and played for Queen Victoria in Victorian England. And then there was this picture of this little boy. There wasn't really any information on him. It was just him and this older white man. And they were posing in these weird poses. And I just looked into his eyes and there was just something that just told me, this is weird. And so, when a picture, the eyes of the subject in a picture follows you around the room, it literally was more than that. It was almost like he was pleading with me and I didn't know what that was. And so I'd already had a contract to write these 2 other historical fiction novels that had nothing to do with him. But I said, I have to write this story, I have to. But obviously I was under contract, so I couldn't write the story. So I kept him on the back burner. In 2016, released 2 novels in that meantime. And then I got a contract for another novel that wasn't about him. But then 2020 happened and I don't know what it was like in North Carolina, but in England, we were kind of locked up for a good 18 months on and off during COVID. And then the Black Lives Matter thing happened. And I saw these pictures of statues being pulled down. And one of the statues was, they didn't actually pull it down, but it was debate about whether they should get rid of it, was the guy who was in the picture with this beautiful little boy called Ndugu Mahali. So I thought, if there's ever a time to write this, it is now. You're at home, you're working from home for the first time ever. And also, it's relevant. So I signed a contract for this other book. And I was like, there was this voice in my head, not in a mad way, but it was almost like, it's time, it's my turn. So I walked away from that contract, like no author does that. Walked away from it. I said, no, this is the book I want to write. I haven't written it yet, but bear with me. And that's how it happened.
And so you have an agent at this point, or was your agent?
Oh, I've had an agent for 15 years. I've had an agent, but not a buyer for this particular book. And so someone believes in me at Macmillan, and she said, look, write a 50-page proposal, which I've never done before, about this book. And so because I'd already been living with him since 2016, it was easy. So I wrote the proposal, they bought it, and I said about writing this novel, which went to 130,000 words. My novels never go past 80,000, but I had to keep going. And I was saying to my publishers, this is going to be too long, isn't it? They just said, just get it out, just get it out. That's how that happened. It was meant to be. It was so meant to be, because I just felt that little boy, Dougal Mahali, was just talking to me. But obviously he died at 13, so there wasn't much of a story. So I knew I had to reimagine what I would want his story to look like if he had been allowed to live.
Well, that just gives me the chills. I mean, that you saw within, 4 years time, that photograph, and it stuck with you so long. Mm-hmm. And now you're hearing about this, this statue. I found it. Why do you think his voice became so loud to you? Was it part of quarantine, you believe, that it just was resonating and just couldn't let go?
Maybe because it was time, because if I'm not going to write it then, when there's a whole narrative about explorers that go to other countries, because we had there was a few statues torn down all over England, so it was huge at the time. We were talking about it every day. It just didn't feel right. Why wouldn't I do it now? So I just had this feeling inside of me that it was time. I really did. And it's almost like he wouldn't let me go, if that makes sense. Not to sound too creepy, but I just feel that he just wouldn't let me go, and I had to write it. And it was easy to write. One of the easiest books I've ever written, yet it was one of the longest, had the most research I've ever done. It should have been the hardest, but it wasn't, because it was there.
Let's break this down. So how long did it take you to write? I mean, 130,000 words, that's a lot. So how long did it take you from when you began to when you finished?
Because the first draft is not this draft that you see, but it's when you get everything right off your chest, off your heart, off your chest, off your head. So I'm going to say 6 months, maybe. I'm not sure.
That's fast.
Because I work as well. So I'm working as a therapist, so you can't devote all your time. And it was before 2020 that I don't remember. It was all a blur. Pre-COVID, post-COVID is a bit of a blur, I think, to everybody. But I would like to say 6 or 7 months, but just the first draft, because after that it goes through extensive stuff, and I had to do some research. So the research would then slow me down. But if I take away the research, 6 months, but with research, a lot more.
All right, well, let's dive into that research. What did that look like, and where were you headed to do it? Because obviously, if you're at home, was it all online or?
Yeah, we couldn't leave the house unless it was for 1 hour of exercise or to the store. But online was great, because I could contact the Africa Museum in Belgium, which is, I don't know if you know much about King Leopold, who, committed these atrocities against the Congolese people. He opened up this museum. So I actually spoke to the curator that was there. I was speaking to various professors in Belgium, all over the world, even in America, all from the comfort of my home. So that was one aspect, because I wanted to make sure that my research was accurate. Even though I was reimagining a story, the dates had to align, because I wanted them to align with what was going on in history at that time. So everything that goes on in history, it was literally, accurate in that time. So I had to make sure, because I didn't want to let the Congolese people down. I thought they'd been let down by history anyway. So I wasn't going to do that, even down to the language that he wrote down, that Celestine wrote down in the attic. That's a real language, and it came from a dictionary that is almost 200 years old.
That was one heartbreak that I had in the novel, that dictionary that Celestine could never get his hands on. It was like within his grasp and then just taken away and disappeared. And to me, that was so symbolic of his entire, childhood, really, just almost in his hands and then gone.
Yeah.
So I was glad that you brought that up. Was this research process, besides being at home, because you have done the other historical novels, anything else different that you had to grasp or tackle that normally you had? And obviously you're talking to professors and curators and whatnot, but anything that just sticks with you through this process?
Absolutely, because it was that unique time that none of us have ever been through before. So I was writing during COVID times. So we were ordered to stay at home, and I was writing about two children locked in the attic that couldn't leave. And I wasn't allowed to leave. Not the same, but you see life imitating art. I'm writing about, heavy themes of colonialism and racism. And for the first time in history, the world was talking about racism and colonialism collectively. So I was being triggered by that, but also being triggered almost by my own work. And as part of the research, I had to look at real pictures, because obviously with slavery, there isn't any much pictorial stuff that you can look at. You can look at writings, but because this was only around 100 years ago, there's real pictures of children with no limbs, with marks on their body. So I had to look at that, dead children. So that was very, very traumatizing. So I've never experienced that level before. So art was imitating real life in real time. Yeah.
Monty talks about this in the novel as well, about how, walking that line can really take away from you personally, because it is so hard. How were you able to balance this, especially during this, darker part of our, the last couple of, years during this decade? Like, how did you deal with that?
As a therapist, I have to practice what I preach. If I'm going to tell people in my professional life that you need to take breaks, you need to take time out, then I had to make sure that I was able to do that. So if I felt that it was getting a bit too much for me, which sometimes it did, I'll admit that, I'll leave it and just go and watch a reality TV show or something and eat some ice cream, because you can't be bombarded by that and feel that you're going to be okay for other people. Because I had to be okay for my patients. I owe a duty of care. So if I'm not all right, that's not right. So I was very, very mindful of that, because I wasn't the only one being triggered. There was a lot of, people of color, Black people around me that were very triggered of what was going on. So I had to be mindful of that, because I knew I wanted to get this book out, but I also wanted to be okay.
Well, we appreciate what all you did for us, obviously for your patients, and just getting the story out, because it's
Thank you.
what that needed to be heard. And I want to go ahead and quote Tommy in the chat box. She says, "I love that you're giving a lion a voice, was born of the voice you heard for so long. That's why this novel has such a heartbeat, I think." And
yeah.
I mean, it was, that was a wonderful quote within the book. And until the lions have their own historians, the history of that hunt will always glorify the hunter.
Yeah.
When did you first read that? And what's, why did it seems like that's such a central theme in this book?
It is. Chinua Achebe is a Nigerian writer who's deceased now, but I'm of Nigerian origin, although I was born in England, raised here. My family, we have roots in Nigeria. So he's a very prolific writer and very much respected, and he wrote that. But it's not, funny enough, it's not actually his quote. It's actually an old African proverb, but we don't know what part of Africa. There's 50 countries in Africa, so it's a very popular proverb. But it sang to me as soon as I heard it. There's different variations of it, but I chose his because I could quote it. But it just sang to me, because I think over the years, or I know over the years, we never get the stories of the Black people. We always get the story of the hunter. And so if we look at colonialism, we look at it from the view of the colonizer, it's never a Black person's voice. And I think that when it's not a Black person's voice, it gets spoken in a way that suits the narrative of the hunter. There are two sides to a story, right? And I think we deserve to hear both.
Is that starting to be corrected in the UK?
Absolutely.
Good.
Finally. I know in America you was a bit quicker off the mark. Here, a little bit slow. I mean, up until about, I would say 6 years ago, we didn't really have, Black people on TV, like families and stuff. But when I lived in America, I was like, wow, this is amazing. So it's a lot different. Yeah, we're a lot behind on that one. Yeah.
Can you talk about the two lion statues that are there at the house, and their symbolic meaning? Because I felt like they were referred to so many times, and obviously the lions, the quote. How does that all fit in?
Do you know what, right? You're amazing for making that connection. I did not connect them that way. I didn't. That's so amazing that you picked that up. I did not connect that. But obviously, unconsciously, therapist talk now, unconsciously, that's what I was doing by putting those lines there. But I had not made the connection until you said it. So thank you.
You're welcome. Well, I think there's so many parts that this novel is going to reveal to us. And I think people have already been talking about rereading it, that I think we're going to get even more the longer it stays out in history. So, all right, let's go ahead and move on to the Two Kings story. Is that something that's based that you read before? Or is that something you wrote? The Black King and the Red King. Was that a story you'd heard before, or was it something that you made up, that you invented?
Oh no, it's real. It's real. Okay. As I said, the research was extensive. So I was so happy when I came across that story, because in my mind I wanted it to be that he did not know what tribe he belonged to, and that was part of his confusion and his shame, because he didn't know where he came from. I don't remember the scene when Muhammad Ali was coming to Africa to fight, and he was looking for his family on the TV screen, because he doesn't know what part he comes from. So, but I kind of knew what tribe, so I kind of played with that. So this story came from that particular tribe in the Congo, the Luba tribe, and it's a real story. It was a fabulous story. I was so happy. It's almost like gold when you come across something like that, because then you can weave it into your story, into the narration. It was just perfection. So it's absolutely real. And what I loved about it was that if my memory serves me correct, the Black King was the good one.
Yes.
And as black is never seen as positive. Again, the lion is black, not positive. So I loved that part of the story, that the Black King was the one that was the good one. That was important.
Absolutely. Where did you find it when your research? Do you remember where you came across it?
No, I think it's because of that particular tribe. There's lots of oral histories, because obviously that's what we relied on, is oral history. So you'll have an historian in the village that will just keep telling the story and then pass it on to the next generation and the next. So this story is real and has been passed on. I think it was about the 17th century, around about that time, and passed on since then. Yeah.
Well, I love that you do have a cyclical feel to this novel, because you start off very early on with the mother telling this parable, right, with the Black King, but then he always comes back to it in his mind. I mean, it's something that stuck with him and through his childhood and then even into adulthood. And then you're talking about this oral history, and how did we end up getting, and please pronounce the name for me. Is it Dikembe? How do you pronounce it?
Yeah, Dikembe.
Dikembe. So his story is also told orally, because that dictaphone was right there. And so that, to me, that's another cyclical phase to this book, because how important that even in the 1900s, 1990s, that it's still an oral story. Important that voice, not just the words, but his voice.
That's true.
I love
That's true.
And
someone mentioned in the chat, it came up that the narration for the audio book is actually an actor from Game of Thrones, Lucian Massamati, who was excellent. Yeah, I love, when I heard his voice, there was 3 people that had auditioned, and when I heard his voice, it was, I almost dropped the phone. It was haunting.
That was it.
I was like, that's him. Yeah.
Well, we have some people out there saying how, Dikembe will always stay with them forever. And I think your words, your story, and possibly the narration even, I think, has that power to stay with us. So Tommy also says stories were one of the few things that colonizers couldn't erase. The oral tradition was heavily carried throughout the novel, especially how the stories are molded and modified. And I'm glad that we do have access to those oral histories, because so much would be lost without them.
Absolutely.
I think one of the things that kind of shook me from the beginning was, he had been so isolated, and intentionally, we find out later on from his, his family intentionally did this to protect him, to put him in a bubble.
Yes.
And, we don't really understand that at the beginning. And I'm glad we didn't, because we needed his unsure, persona to be able for the story to play out. But when he sees that ship, it's like a privilege almost for him to be on the ship. And we're thinking, oh no, we know what's coming, right? Um,
Yeah.
and so I thought you did a phenomenal job working us up. But, Dikembe also feels very justified in his position among the family, being the youngest and having that, I'm the good king, I'm the one, the good child. Is that common amongst the younger of that, the Congolese people? Because a lot of times in other cultures, it's the eldest that holds that status. But this is a little bit flipped, right?
Yeah.
With him being
Yeah.
the youngest. So how does that play in?
Yeah, in African cultures, it's the oldest son who's revered. End of story. I had to flip it because this woman, this mother, had watched all her kids been almost taken into slavery. She wasn't going to let this happen to the last one. She had to keep him safe. And that's why she kind of molded him. And also he was, he was his mother's boy. He was like the favorite kind of, he liked cooking, didn't he?
Yes.
In African cultures, men don't cook. So this one liked cooking. And because they kept him in this bubble, they were almost forced to be together. He wasn't allowed to be a quote unquote typical African warrior man who went out and did the work. He had to be with mum. So in that sense, their relationship was bonded uniquely, whereas it wouldn't have happened if it was like a normal time. And again, going back to the research, because I had to date the book at a certain time because I don't want to give a spoiler. Has everyone read it?
Everyone's read it. Yes.
Right.
We have all read it.
I needed Dikembe to be alive at the end. And 99 years old was as high as I could go. So it had to be at that certain amount. So those dates are very precise. So the stuff in Congo, it was kind of rife, but in that particular area where he lived, it hadn't got to them yet. It was just kind of getting there. And so that's why the parents knew that something was up here. And obviously they killed the father, they hurt the boys. So it was getting closer and closer because they were kind of like deep in the jungle. So, these people hadn't got there yet, but they were coming and they would have found him.
And they knew that, and that's why he had to go at that moment. You talk about his grief, and I really love that you did go into human emotion because, for so much of it, they have to shut off to be able to deal with their situation. But you did allow him to grieve as much his mother as his father. I mean, his father, he knows died, but really he's losing his mother like a death as well. And so that grief, I was appreciative that you went there because, it might have been easier as an author, right? To just, oh, you can't have to deal with it. Let's move on. But you did give him that moment. How difficult was it stepping in and writing throughout? Because this is such a heavy book in places. How did you get your head into that, into their bodies? Like, how did you do that?
I think with Dikembe, it was almost like, so if you go back to this picture in 2016, it was almost like he was like almost beside me, like it was just so easy. And I don't look at the book anymore, but when I have looked at little pages, I'm like, did I write that? I didn't write that. That's really weird. That's not how I write. So it was almost like he was there. And I must say, it was on May last year when I launched it. I had a book launch, a little party in a bookstore, and I was getting ready for that book launch, and he just left. It was almost like he went. Now, I'm not into any, ghost things. That's not who I am. I go to church. That's me. I love Jesus. But it's just like, he just left. I didn't feel his presence anymore. It was gone. It was almost like, okay, we're done here.
Right.
So before then, it was very much, something took over me. It didn't feel like it was my words. Because again, if I look at some of the book now, just open it, I'm thinking, that's not how I write. That's not my style. Yeah.
Did you find the experience different writing for Dikembe than you did for Laura? Because you're a female and you have those perspectives, right? But with Dikembe, was it different at all? Or did you just feel it just was coming to you no matter what?
It was coming no matter what. I guess because they were very similar. They were really similar. So it wasn't really that far removed when you wrote one and the other one. Obviously, Laura had a certain amount of privilege because she, was white presenting, right? So there was little things in there that I threw in that maybe certain people wouldn't know. So for instance, she had mental health issues, obviously, and she was getting counseling from this Dr. Raj. If she was a Black man, she wouldn't have got that counseling. She would have been doped up. So just things like that. She had a privilege, and that's the conflict that Monty had with her, really, because she didn't really, because poor Laura didn't go anywhere. She knew nothing about nothing. You know, all she cared about was just keeping herself alive, just about.
Right.
So she was very ignorant to those things. But yeah, that aside, they were very similar. So it wasn't that far removed. They were both abused by people that were supposed to look after them. They were both traumatized, and they were both pretty unusual. And they were connected and bonded because of that.
One of your other themes, which you brought up, was you said one of the greatest of gifts was the desire for more. Where did that come from, and how did you want it to play out throughout the novel?
Where was that in the novel?
So you talked about he had talked about, I think it was Dikembe, when he was talking to Laura, when he said one of the greatest gifts they gave me was the desire for more, wanting more to do. I guess, you know, to me, that's almost like giving them that tenacity, maybe.
Yes, absolutely. Because look at the success he became. I know that money's not defined, sorry, the success is not defined by money, or in a capitalist society but he had, you know, he helped people. He was teaching people to read. He could have gone down the road of politician. And there was a moment where he meets a politician. That politician's real. He was the second black mayor, well, first black mayor in England, John Archer. So he meets him. And there's that moment where, I could do this. But, you know, he's honest. He's like, no, I'll just give money to the cause. I can't do that. I'm not going to be a revolutionary. That's not his thing. But he will give money. He will help these men who are less fortunate, and he will put his experience to good use. So he became a success. He had a beautiful family who loved him very much. So he wasn't going to stay down. Absolutely. He'd lived this life of a certain privilege for a black person in the 1800s, 1900s. That was quite, you know, he went to the top school, you know, and that kind of stuff. So yeah, there was a desire for more. He knew he was destined for more.
And his mother knew it from the beginning as well. And I think she planted that seed, which also kept him moving forward when so much tried to tear him down. And the same thing with Laura, right? Like she also had, at times she would pause, but then I think through Dikembe, that kept her. It's almost like the mother helped Dikembe, and now Dikembe was helping Laura. And so it was just a neat connection as well there. I did want to talk briefly. You got longlisted for this novel. And was it how do you pronounce it? Is it Jhalak?
The Jhalak Prize, and I didn't get to the short list.
You know what? I think the long list is an honor in of itself.
Yeah, it is.
And then also your book was chosen for Book of the Month. And so what was that like, this receiving these accolades, these opportunities for more readers to, you know, get exposed? Like, tell me about that experience.
I must admit, obviously I knew about Jhalak Prize because it's an English thing, so that was wonderful. But the Book of the Month was, I had never heard of it before, right? And so my publisher sent me this email, oh my gosh, it's been Book of the Month. I'm like, hey! So I had to research it. I didn't know what was going on. You know, but it sold really well with them. So, and every time there's something on Instagram, it's usually a Book of the Month thing. So I looked at the previous Book of the Month. I was like, oh, wow, I'm in good company here. So I realized after the fact that it was a big deal. So yeah, that was definitely an honor and a privilege. Yeah, really was.
A lot of people are saying that's where they got their copy.
Yeah, I saw, yeah.
So the other thing that I noticed in this book was your references to butterflies and moths. And then lo and behold, when I pulled up your website, there's some butterflies or moths on it. I don't know if that was intentional and what their significance is.
No, when the guy did the website, that part of the website he did 100 years ago, before this was even a twinkle in my eye. But in the book, when I referenced it, I kind of wanted there to be something. This was Laura's stepmother, right?
Correct.
And what she was painting and stuff. I wanted her to have some kind of, excuse the word, crazy. I wanted there to be something that she would use to batter this child with emotionally. So the whole butterfly thing is, it kind of points to the fact that the stepmother had obviously some issues with her own parents, and growing into this, you know, into this beautiful creature. But no, there was no connection there. I just wanted something of a history for this woman. to give you some insight into why is she doing this.
Okay. Did she kill her husband?
Ah, do you know what? Probably. I don't know. We'll never know.
We'll
It
never
wouldn't
know.
surprise me considering what she went on to become. We don't, maybe. I don't know. It wouldn't surprise
Leave it
me.
up to
Yeah,
interpretation. It definitely was in her potential to do so, for sure.
definitely. Definitely. Awful woman. Yeah.
And then the other outstanding question I have, was that his brother? Was that Paco?
Everyone asked this question. Every single person. I knew it was coming. And again,
Up to interpretation.
absolutely. If you believe that Malcolm was his brother, then in my mind, I don't think it was him. To me, Malcolm represents Black people of that time. If you ended up in England at that time, chances are you probably came from one of the colonies and there was trauma involved. I just feel that Malcolm just represents everyone.
I agree. I thought for a second, maybe, especially because we weren't sure about the parentage, because we knew that there was this mixed race child and now there's another African American in the area. But to me, I don't know that he could have denied his little brother.
Yeah, I
I
don't
really
think
don't
so.
think that if he would have came at him with this story, of his family, that Paco could have shut it off. I don't think
Yeah,
that was
I
my
don't think so.
opinion, but I had to ask. So I didn't want to disappoint. Glad I asked it since I'm on the list. I don't want to break that record.
Yeah.
Then I also wanted to see talk about what's in a name, right? Because so
Oh,
much that was his identity. He started off with Dikembe, then he goes to Celestine, and then he ends up going back and choosing his name. So
yeah.
why was this important to you?
Yeah, so important. There's a scene in the school where the headmaster says, what is your name? And he says, Dikembe goes, no, what is your name? And he finally says Celestine. And I also remember that scene in Roots. When Roots first came out, I was too young to watch it, but I watched it as an adult. And that scene, my name is Toby. My name is Kunta Kente. No, it's Toby. It always stayed with me because a name in our culture, and I'll probably vouch and say the entire African continent, the name is, I know it's important in every culture, but there is something about the name in our culture. Its meaning is just so huge. So for example, in the Yoruba culture, for example, if maybe, I don't know, an auntie died, like, oh, this happened. An auntie of mine, my father's sister died before I was born. So my middle name reflects her. You have to kind of have someone to reflect. So if someone dies before the birth, that will be that child's name. Or if you've wanted to have children for a long time, you've been praying, the child's name would say something like, thank you, God, for this gift. It is so meaningful. So they've taken that away from him, stripped that from him, and given him this anglicized name that's nothing to do with his history. It was important for him to regain that autonomy, regain that power. This is my name. And he chose his favorite brother as the surname. And in those days, you could do stuff like that and just have documentation. Now I think it'll be too hard. But back in the day, you can do those things. Just have whatever name you want to. So yeah, in African culture, the name is just unbelievably important. I can't stress it enough. Yeah.
And they continued that with Dikembe's granddaughter as well, right? Her middle name was also, traveled through. And there was a little bit of talk even of Laura's name being so important and the pronunciation and spelling. So it's, I loved that was part of your novel. All right. So with the monuments, I want to go back to this. Do you agree with Laura, tear them down, or with Monty, let them up and let's talk about why they're there and why they shouldn't be?
Great question. Yeah, mine's quite unpopular. I want them to stay or put them in a museum because we must not erase what happened. We need to remember, because I just feel that out of sight, out of mind. So to put them in a museum would be quite good. So it's not celebrating them, it's putting them there to say that this is this is recent history that happened and may we never forget. Because with the Congolese situation, we're talking about 25 million Africans were killed, slaughtered, and most people don't know about that. You know, so there's a statue of King Leopold, this man who never stepped foot in Africa. He never went to Africa, and yet he plundered and raped the country and was responsible for all these deaths. So we need to know that this man existed. We need to know what he did.
I agree. I think that's,
You know,
we have to remember our history. We have to.
the good and the bad and the ugly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if we only talk about what we like, then that's going to get us in trouble later. So we have to, we must talk about it.
Yeah.
I do want to also talk about how important homeland is, because we talked about names, but when that was also an issue is, where are you from? And is it your home or is it your homeland? And that was really important to Dikembe. And we find out at the end that he wants his ashes taken back to his homeland. So can you talk a little bit about the importance of that in the African culture?
The importance of homeland. Yeah, I think that when you
just like, where are you from type of thing, like that identity.
Yeah, I mean, that question, where are you from, is always quite triggering to a Black person here, I'd say. I mean, because when someone asks you that, even though you're born here, it's almost saying, well, you're not really from here, so where are you from? So you can have fun with it and say, well, I'm from London. No, where are you really from? You know, and it can get tiresome sometimes. But as an African, yeah, I like to identify as African, but also I'm British, you know. But with Dikembe, I just think because everything was just so thrust upon him, it was important for him to forge who he was for himself. But yeah, homeland is very important, because when you're displaced from somewhere, and you're displaced to this area where you're not welcome, you yearn, you almost romanticize it, your homeland, because it's where you feel you belong, because nobody here wants you.
Right. You know, I thought that was interesting, because they were making them say, you know, their name, this anglicized name, where you're from here, not, you could never really refer back. And that was important to, you know, Richard, to make sure that everything was taken away from him that would ever give him the opportunity to identify as an African again. So him taking ownership of that back at the end was almost like his justice of, this is who I am.
And just to say, the real child of Duga Mahali that had died at 12 in when did he die? Yeah, he died when he went on another expedition, and he died in the Congo. So where he died, the real child, that's where they scattered the ashes. So I made that connection at the end.
I thought it was great. All right, everybody start getting your questions ready. I'm going to do what I always do, it's a favorite part, rapid fire questions. Okay, so don't think about it too much. It's normally an either or, and we'll get, just for you. You ready? Okay.
I've had carbs for dinner, so just so you know.
Okay, perfect. Give you some energy. All right. Butterflies or moths?
Oh, butterflies.
Tea or wine?
Tea.
London or the suburbs?
Oh, to live the suburbs, London to have a nice time.
Perfect. Romance or historical fiction?
Oh, both.
Are you a plotter or a pantser?
What's a pantser?
You go by the seat of your pants.
Oh, totally, yeah.
Early bird or a night owl?
In between.
Dikembe or Laura?
Dikembe is my baby.
Sea or countryside?
Sea.
Hardcover or paperback?
Hardcover.
Beautiful. See, those carbs paid off.
It did.
All right. Who out there has a question? If you do, go ahead and raise your hand, and I'm going to ask you to unmute and spotlight you. Mary, we would love for you to ask your question. Go for it.
Okay. My question is, why didn't you have Tilly and Dikembe meet at the end of the book?
Yeah, I get asked this a lot. You know, it crossed my mind, it did, but I just thought, again, this is about him having autonomy over his life. He decided that part of my life is done. We're not going back to that. I don't want to see her. And he had a right to that. So yeah, I did think about it, but yeah, he made such a big deal about where he was now and how much he loved his life. I just didn't know why he'd want to go back to that time.
Mhm.
Because Tilly, remember, there was so much pain. She had all this freedom, and yet he had nothing. He probably felt the worst that he'd ever felt, or it was the beginning of, by meeting Tilly. So why bring that back into his consciousness? You know?
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Thank you.
no. Thank you.
Great question, Mary. All right, who else has a question out there?
I just wanted to know, did he subconsciously actually see his brother, or was it a figment of his imagination? It was never his brother, but another Black male.
Could you say that again? Because you really cut out then in the beginning.
Here, I'm
Did
gonna
he
go ahead
actually
and-
see his older brother, or was it just another Black male that he saw was his older brother?
Oh,
Because
okay.
he
Yeah,
ran into him 2 different times.
yeah, that Malcolm Sanderson, you know, we talked about before. To me, it was just he just represented every Black person that was there at that time, who'd gone through trauma, came from the, you know, that were colonized. So to me, he wasn't. But I left that open to interpretation for the reader to decide whether that was him or not.
Did you hear that, B? Under your connection. So she's saying, I'll message you later, but she thinks it's open to interpretation, but she believes it probably wasn't.
That's clear.
Thanks, B. All right. Who else out there has a question? I know she said my connection is tripping, so
All right, yeah.
or worse. Somebody wants to know, is there a place to get autographed books? I don't know if you have that here in the US or if it's only in the UK. Do you sign some for some bookstores?
I do in England, yeah. But I haven't done anything for America as of yet.
Do you want to name off those? Do you remember what bookstores they were in off the top of your head, or maybe not?
Oh, in England?
Mhm.
Oh, there were some in Waterstones, in Victoria. What was the other ones? The Jam bookstore. I'll probably be going there in a couple of weeks in East London. Yeah, just ad hoc, really. I mean, do you have people that are from England in your book group?
No, but I do know that people have ordered from Waterstone for books that we don't have here. Sometimes they will order over just to get it because not everything is published here in the US. So
Oh, okay.
if somebody wants to, I guess it's a possibility.
Yeah, Goldsboro Books. I did a big one with them. Goldsboro
Okay.
Books.
Okay.
I think it's spelled this. Yeah, Goldsboro. Yeah, they have quite a few. And if you order from them, they'll probably just get me in to sign more. So yeah, they're a good resource, and they're kind of independent, so it's quite nice. But yeah, they took the large order. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
So just to let you know, the American version and the English version have the Americans been Americanized. So it's different wording in some parts, just to let you know.
Were the covers different?
No, for the first time, my American edition stayed the same. That's never happened before.
And so was that part of your vote, or was that just something that each of the publishers liked and that was signed off on? Or
Yeah, I mean, with one of my books, I think my first book in England, I had flowers on the cover. But in the American version, it was they were inspired by the Obama election. So it almost had the picture of Obama and Sasha on the front. You know what I mean? So it's totally different. So this was the first time. Yeah, first time.
I love it.
So striking, so striking.
Oh, I thought the cover was phenomenal, and it just with the necklace and just how much goes into a portrait, right? Like it's so symbolic of who is this person and what are we seeing behind, and not only that, but inside the house now. So you're looking inside the person and inside the home.
Yeah.
Which is what's the symbolic meaning of that bird on the front? Was there anything that
I asked the artist that actually, hummingbird, right? She did tell me, and I think I've forgotten what she said, but she there is a reason about there's something specific that the hummingbird does. And I was like, oh, okay. But I can't remember it right now. I'm sorry.
Well,
but
if you do, just message me and I'll share it with the group. So it's hard to think of everything. The other artifact Tommy wanted to talk about was the doll in the attic, and also the artifact of the necklace. So what was your meaning behind those and how they were used? Because it really became an emotional moment at the end when Dikembe,
Yeah,
he never would see them again, right? That he
yeah,
had them.
yeah. I knew when I was writing this book that I wanted there to be something that reflects his tribe. And the Baluba tribe, they, this is a real necklace. So it had nothing to do with Black Panther or anything, but now I look at it, it's very similar, right, to Black Panther, but it's a real necklace, it exists. It just had to be something that would tie him to his country. With the doll, I think I was playing with the reader, because there was one point where, I don't know, you think the doll is a real person and it's all a bit weird. And I think porcelain dolls can look a bit creepy as well, the eyes flopping about and stuff. So I think for visual representation, it was important to have that, really. And the doll was his only friend, that's all he had, really. So that they were important, yeah.
All right, I'm going to spotlight Cheryl. Go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, I think a few of us asked in the chat, was Miss J working on something currently? We're interested to know what you have in the hopper next.
Sure, I'm working on a couple of books at the moment. Another historical fiction novel, this time based around a woman in the 1800s. And I'm working on a thriller as well, strangely enough, which is a modern tale. And I kind of wrote that as a palate cleanser after the Attic Child, because the Attic Child was so traumatic for me. Only a writer could say that a palate cleanser to get over the trauma is to write a murder mystery. It was so easy. It was set in 2024, so I didn't have to do no research. It was just, I just had to write about something completely far removed from what I just written. So I don't know if that'll see the light of day, but it's there. The historical fiction novel, it still needs to take a bit of shape. But I would like to tell you about the other two novels, the historical. One that's called Wartime Sweethearts. It has an African-American connection, because in 1943, the African-American GIs came over to these small towns in England, and they got with the ladies, and they left their children behind, went back to America, and they had these so-called brown babies, they called them. So we're talking about 1940s England. I mean, to see these mixed race children, mixed heritage children running around, they were hidden. So I was fascinated with that story. So I wrote a book on that. So that was the book that I did a few years before The Attic Child. And it's fascinating because these so-called brown babies, they're in their 70s now. And I've met some of them and they're amazing. So please look up that book, look up the story. This is another hidden history that we don't know much about. And all the GIs are probably dead now. So these children who are in their 70s don't know who their father is. And it's heartbreaking when you talk to them, because it's like, I don't know who I am. I lived in this, this small town in England where I was the only mixed person, and I don't know who my father is. I just know that he's African-American. So they're doing a genealogy test and everything now. It's fascinating. That's all I want to say. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Now there was a second one too, another book. Did you want to tell us about the other one?
Oh, Orphan Sisters. Yeah, that was the one before Wartime Sweethearts. And that was really motivated by my parents who came to England in the 50s. And they came to this whole thing about, there used to be these signs, no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. So if you try and get a place to stay, that would face them. And I really wanted to tell their story because I'd grown up with hearing about it. So it's about a Nigerian family who come to England to seek their fortune, but it's not what they think it's going to be.
Thank you for asking that, Cheryl. What was your parents' reaction to that book? I'm just curious how I know we weren't talking about that book, but how was it received?
Yeah, my mum was gone by the time I wrote that one, unfortunately, but I quite enjoyed interviewing my dad and my auntie about it, and they were just, it's a different generation, isn't it? They don't want to talk about it. They're just like, yeah, it happened. But funny enough, they moved back to Africa. They didn't want to stay here. They had their kids here, stayed for as long as they could, and they would come to see us maybe once a year, but they didn't want to stay here. They were done. So they ended up going back home anyway. The irony of the story. Yeah.
So there is a question in the chat box about the two new ones that you're writing. Are those, I know you said may see the light of day. So is there any predicted date for either one of those since you're under contract, or is it? Okay.
Yeah, so the historical fiction one is on contract. So that should drop next year. Because remember, the paperback for Attic Child hasn't even come out in the States yet. It's only the hardback. Paperback hasn't come out until September. So this one won't come out until at least another year or two. Yeah, in America.
Is there a working title, or are you still
Oh
working?
yeah, the Manual for Good Wives.
Ooh, that sounds fascinating. Now, this title, The Attic Child, was that one that you came up with, or something that evolved?
No, it was when it was first conceived, it was like Tilly and Celestine, that was the title. And then when I decided they were going to be in an attic for a matter of time, I thought, you know what, The Attic Child, let's just keep it simple. Because it was going to be a love story between Tilly and Celestine, and I'm like, no, we're not doing that. Because remember, he took over. So I told the story that was supposed to be told. So yeah, Attic Child was like a no-brainer. And usually my publishers will fight me on the title. They'll always change it. But this one, they were like, no, this is great. We're sticking with this. Yeah.
Now you talked about the first draft, and I'm assuming it went through multiple. Did it end up, I don't have a word count, but did they take a lot out, or did you have to add more in? Like, was it pretty much?
No, I thought they would, because I said, look, I know I'm not supposed to go over 80 or 90,000. It goes, don't worry, just do it. So I've never been given that kind of leeway before. And to be honest, when I've written my novels, I struggle to get to 80,000. Usually I'm trying to add bits. If I tell you, this book was so unique in the fact that the covers didn't change, the name didn't change. I was given free rein with the word count. I've never written a book like this in this way before. And I don't think that will happen again. It was just a unique moment in time. It's almost like I had to write this. I had to get it out of my system and then move on. It's really bizarre. I've never felt that way before. And I said, I don't think I'll feel that way again. And obviously I don't want to die soon, but if I were to, I'm happy I've written this book as my legacy. I don't know, it was really, really strange feeling. Strange feeling. Everything aligned perfectly.
Well, one of your readers out there, Mary, said, you talked how it was so quick for you to write. She says, I felt it was a super quick read, and it kept my interest the whole time. So,
good.
I think your urgency of getting it out there, we felt that in reading it as well. Like, it came across in the pacing. What do you think that you talk about your legacy and that this is one that will stick with you. What part of this book do you think about the most? Is there anything that just stays, on rewind for you?
It's just him. It was more when he was more present, but it's just that little boy, really. And there's so many other kids, and I put it in the dedication. There's some other names that I put there, and it's just him. It's just that he's a baby, he's a child, and he never grew up, and so really it's him, because he's real. And again, unlike all the other stories I've ever written, they've all been a figment of my imagination, every book I've had, except this one. This person existed, he lived. And who knows what he could have become if he'd been allowed to carry on.
I have another question. I'm going to go ahead, Sonia.
Yeah, hi. I have an observation and a question, but I want to give the observation first. One thing that I thought that you did just brilliantly was how you showed how when someone comes into a culture and they're not of that culture, the new culture insists that they look like them, act like them, dress like them, and speak like them. But even though you do those things, you're still off to the side. You eat lunch alone unless somebody else eats with you. They want to make sure that it's such a dichotomy, because it's like they want you to merge with them because they insist you be them, but all they really want is, I guess, your mirror of them, because they don't really accept you into the culture. And I think that's in America, we're seeing that here. It's demanding everyone speak English immediately. And I just think it's the wrong way to look at people. And it was just, I love the way that you showed that, how Celestine did everything he could to be a part of this new community because he knew that was going to be his life. But still, it was such a horrible struggle. It just made me cry for him. So I just wanted to tell you how wonderful that was. But the question I had was something you sort of alluded to and then we jumped away from. Did you actually say that they changed some of your novel when it was published in America? They changed some of the wording?
Oh, yes. Yeah, no, yeah. Don't be alarmed. Just the wording. So just certain words. So for example, you guys say stroller, and we say pushchair or buggy.
Uh-huh.
Just things like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, nothing major, just really just things like that. And also we spell mum M-U-M and you say M-O-M, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, just things like that. Nothing,
Oh,
nothing
okay.
else.
I was
things
just
like that.
curious.
No, yeah, exactly. No.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Yeah,
that.
thank you.
All right, we do have another question from Jill, so I'm going to quickly go and spotlight her as well. Go ahead, Jill. Oh, sorry, I did that. Go ahead and unmute again.
Okay, hi. Okay, I just finished this morning and I'm really overwhelmed and full inside, and it is probably my favorite read this year already. I loved it. But it is there's so much in there. It's so rich, it's so full. And I've just been thinking about it the last hour. I just mentioned about an hour and a half ago. And what would you like for us as readers to take with us? What is I know this is a crazy question, but it's so much. I mean, you covered so many things, and you presented it, like a lot of it, in such a subtle way through him. And I mean, it was just beautiful, but I feel changed by it, but which is, such a great thing to feel changed by your book. I mean, beautiful, lovely. But what would be the main thing, or a couple of the main things that you would want us as readers to take with us?
I think for me, it's every story deserves to be told. That's yeah.
Okay.
I would say that. Yeah, for
beautiful.
Sure. Thank you.
I love that answer. Thank you. Thank you for your book. I loved it.
Thank you. Thank you for liking it.
I loved it.
Definitely. Thanks for opening up, Jill. All right, we do have one more question in the chat box. I'm just so happy you gave Dikembe a happily ever after. The love. I was so worried about the ending. I think we all were. But the love, was that ending always your intent?
Oh gosh, yeah. Because if I'm going to put you through a trauma fest, I'm not going to leave you with trauma. I'm not going to do that. I'm never going to do that. And I feel that with him, because I think I teased it, there was a minute in the middle part where you thought maybe he died, we got beaten to death. But of course that wasn't going to happen. This man was going to have the best life. He was going to live to a very old age, and he'd be healthy, because not everyone who lives to 100 is healthy. He's healthy. You know, he's surrounded by people that love him. It's a very small family, but they all love him. He's materially okay. He never has to worry about money. So I knew that he would have to find love in all of that. And I wanted Marjorie to be the type of woman that's not going to take any crap, because he wasn't a great guy to her in the beginning. I didn't want to paint him as a saint, because someone that's been through that trauma that he's been through cannot be a good husband in the first instant. He can't. He has to do some growing. But it's only a certain type of woman that could sit with him. And she literally sat with him on the floor and met him where he was at. And she said to him, look, I'm not going to be your girlfriend. I'm out. Married someone else, came back, and she, you know, they had the best time. So I always knew he would be in love, because ultimately it's a love story. All the other themes are all part of it. But for me, it was a love story between Marjorie and Dikembe. They found each other later in life. They had this miracle baby. And yeah, he had to have that, because his mother, she was stripped away from him, or he was stripped away from her. So that's the only woman in his life that he truly loved. Hence why he was having all these silly relationships and being horrible to these women by just having sex and leaving them, because he just couldn't do it. He wasn't a bad person, but you know, he needed someone.
And it was always on his terms as well. So it was, you know, it could have happened earlier. It could have happened a little easier, but even along Laura's and Monty's research journey, right? It wasn't always like, oh, let's give you the information immediately. They worked for it. And Marjorie and he worked for their relationship. I mean, it failed, right? And then they had this time period away, and then they came back to this love story. So I thought that too, that it was because she's right. He may not have been ready for her if they would have married at the beginning. And it may
He
have been a
wasn't.
failed relationship. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. He was still dealing with the shame of abuse, you know, all those things. And that never truly went away, but he was learning to kind of deal with it. And she was the right woman for him because she let him just be vulnerable. He felt vulnerable with her, and they were vulnerable with each other. And as you said, it worked later in life. You know, so yeah, absolutely.
and well matched with her intellect, like her father said, not
Yeah.
too many men would have seen her as a gem, you know, but he did truly value her intellect and her perspective. So I love
Absolutely.
brought a little feminism into the novel. We
Of
appreciate
course,
that.
of course. She's going to be a strong woman and well read. Yeah, she's not going to take no nonsense.
I always ask at the end what books that you would recommend for us readers, something that maybe you've read. Now, if you haven't checked out her website, she does have a full long list of books that she has enjoyed in the past, but I always like to ask live as well. Do you have anything on your radar that you can tell us?
A few months ago, I read a book, it's a weird book called The Free Loves of Sebastian Cooper. I really enjoyed it. I don't think it's for everybody, but it's the main character is literally dead. And it's about these characters at his funeral. And I just found it really compelling. And sometimes books touch me in a way, in a certain way, because it's where I'm at the time. So I'm not sure where I was at that time, but I really enjoyed that. So books are seasonal for me, but there's also books that I can read anytime and I love. And one of those would be I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Yes, I know it's stereotypical, everyone says it, but I mean it. Maya Angelou is a genius. And I feel that she's really, I don't know, she's really influenced my writing in so many ways. Yeah. So yeah. Oh, some more stuff.
Well, thank you for sharing those. Thank you, Lola, and all you out there for joining. Please make sure you check out her website and follow her on Instagram for the latest news. We're going to be looking for those 2 new novels coming out. Would love for everyone to follow the LBs, the Lover of Books, on Facebook and Instagram, and check out those reviews, recommendations, and obviously more author chats coming up on Sunday, June 25th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We're shifting gears again, and I'm hosting Ann Napolitano to discuss Oprah's 100th book club pick, Hello, Beautiful. This sumptuous family saga is one of those rare novels whose singular characters are so beautifully rendered, it is as if they're your best friends and you're grateful to be in their orbit, says Oprah Daily. And if you don't already know, it's loosely based on Little Women. So if you're a fan of Little Women, check that out. And even if you're not, I think it's a beautifully written book. If you know of an author that you would like to chat with, please let me know. And also just subscribe to my YouTube channel. This recording will be put on there as well as others. And I think I'm up to 27 now, maybe. So check out that channel. I'll be the Lover of Books to check out all those past chats. Again, Lola, you are amazing. Thank you for staying up with us. And your lighting did change. I think your sunshine went away, so it's definitely nice now. And all you readers out there for joining. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Everybody have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.